Oh, I should have gotten some vanilla ice cream.
Yeah, well, it doesn't look very good when you're eating during the videos.
Oh,
Well, I
okay.
mean, think about it. I mean, it's supposed to
I
be
know,
a
I'm
serious
kidding.
topic, and you're sitting there being, you know. Um,
Easy killer.
yeah. You want to read, or you want me to read?
No, I can read first, yeah.
Okay. All right. This is the Book of Revelation, chapter
Chap-
12.
Chapter 12. The woman and the dragon. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed in the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and crying out in pain and agony and giving birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, a huge red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 royal crowns on his heads. His tail swept a third of the stars from the sky, tossing them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, ready to devour her child as soon as she gave birth. Wow, that doesn't sound pleasant. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where God had prepared a place for her to be nourished for 1,260 days. Interesting. It's about 3.5 years, right?
That's the same number as the witnesses who are on earth.
The war in heaven. Then a war broke out in heaven. Michael, only one of 3 angels named in the whole Bible, I believe. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But the dragon was not strong enough, and no longer was any place found in heaven for him and his angels. And the great dragon hurled down that ancient serpent called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was hurled to earth, and his angels with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, he who accuses them day and night before our God. Excuse me. They have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they did not love their lives so as to shy away from death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea. With great fury the devil has come down to you, knowing he is only a short time. The woman persecuted. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle to fly from the presence of the serpent to her place in the wilderness, where she was nourished for a time, and times, and half a time. Then from the mouth of the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away in the torrent. But the earth helped the woman and opened its mouth to swallow up the river that had poured from the dragon's mouth. And the dragon was enraged at the woman and went to make war with the rest of her children who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And the dragon stood on the shore of the sea. So what does Revelation chapter 12 mean? Starting in chapter 12, Revelation takes a detour from the step-by-step narrative of the end times. Wow, that's a good way to look at it, a detour. The events described occur over a wide variety of eras, including past, present, and future. In the course of these visions, 7 main figures are described. 5 of those appear in the chapter. The next 2 chapters will continue to fill in the details. Chapter 15 adds another vision of heaven. In chapter 16, we'll return to a more chronological depiction of the last days. This passage typifies the grand symbolism found in much of the book of Revelation. John sees a woman clothed with the sun, crying out in pain as she gives birth. Waiting to kill her child is the red dragon. The woman symbolizes Israel. The dragon is Satan. and the male child is Jesus. The male child is caught up to God, a reference to Jesus' ascension after his resurrection, and the woman is able to flee into the wilderness. Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 through 6. Next, John observes a war in heaven, where Michael the archangel fully casts Satan out of heaven. This is not a depiction of the initial fall of Satan. According to the Old Testament books such as Job, the devil was still able to access heaven and accuse humanity before God. At this point, however, he will be entirely evicted and thrown down to earth. This results in rejoicing in heaven, but also a dire warning. Now that Satan is running out of time and confined to the earth, his rage will be taken out on mankind, especially Israel. Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 through 12. Jesus predicted an abomination of desolation in Matthew chapter 24, verses 15 and 16. There, he most likely referred to a defilement of the temple by the Antichrist. Jesus warned that people ought to respond to this act by fleeing to the mountains. Here in Revelation, the people of Israel are given supernatural protection by God, symbolized by the reference to wings, and able to survive for a period of 3.5 years. Echoing other prophetic messages about an invasion by a northern army, Ezekiel 38. John also sees the serpent attempt to wash the woman away with a flood of water from his mouth. This would symbolize an armed invasion. God again protects the woman with what Ezekiel says is a tremendous earthquake. Ezekiel 38, verses 19 through 22. This enrages Satan, who commits to attacking the offspring of the woman. Revelation 12, verses 13 through 17. The 5 figures mentioned in this chapter are the woman who symbolizes Israel, the 10-headed dragon who represents Satan, the male child who is Jesus, Satan himself as the 4th figure, and the offspring of the woman, referring to the people of Israel. The following chapter will introduce the last 2 major chapters, who are among the most infamous in all of Scripture, the Antichrist and the false prophet. Wow, fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea. I have no idea why this is in Revelation. What does this have to do with anything?
Well, remember the 7-year period, number one. Remember how it's broken up in essentially to 2 halves, the first 3.5 years and the second 3.5 years, right?
Yeah, I do remember.
So basically what this says to me is that, Satan was cast out of heaven and basically thrown down to earth. And basically, at that point, reigning earth pretty much. And on top of that, because Satan knows his time is limited here as well, because he knows what's going to happen as well.
Yeah, well, what that did say is that it's talking about the past, present, and the future, kind of like Scrooge again.
Yeah.
That was obviously talking about the past.
Yeah. But I think the biggest key to understand here is that Satan has been cast out, thrown to the earth, and because he knows his time is limited in terms of what's going to happen with the end times, that's when Satan, really takes everything out, or as much as he can while he's here, before actually Christ returns, and then throws him into the lake of fire.
So you think Satan knows he'll lose? Or does he think he'll win?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I got to believe that ultimately, maybe it's twofold in that he thinks he can win or he has a chance. But at the same time, though, he does probably know, what's predicted or written as far as the end times. So I think ultimately he knows he's going to lose, but because of his arrogance and what's the other word I'm looking for? You know, non-acceptance of what's going to happen. His rebelliousness and so forth. He's still going to go for it, so to speak. Because I think his attitude, I mean, put yourself in his shoes, right? I mean, if you know how everything is written out, and if you know that the grand creator, God himself, ultimately is in control, and, is going to win, then what do you have to lose?
Well, is it possible that if Lucifer begged for forgiveness, that God would forgive him?
Well, you're asking one man to another. I suppose it's possible, but
that doesn't necessarily mean it would change his fate.
nor is it indicated anywhere that I know of in the scriptures that he would even consider it.
Well, and it comes down to all I was thinking is two things. Is what is the saying? A leopard never changes its spots,
I guess, yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Let me finish my thought, please.
Yeah.
Okay, so two things. That's why I think most people are not capable of real change. I know it's nice to think so. I think things can be done temporarily, but our nature tends to overtake our nurture many times.
So, in what would you say our nature is? What would you define that as?
Well, I think it differs for each person.
I agree, but ultimately, if you just made a very grandiose statement, which is people are not capable of changing. So
But
if they're not,
I ended that by saying in most cases.
okay, no, I understand, but by and large, what you're saying is it's the nature of people that they are what they are, and by and large,
Well, we
they're
know,
not.
yeah,
I'm just asking. So
well, we
if
know people make mistakes, okay? So I'm not saying that people won't make mistakes, but I'm saying that our nature is like you and me, Dan, we're two different people. And we're going to have two different tendencies. And I'm not going to go into specifics because it's not the appropriate forum. But I could point to specifics about things that you probably are never going to be able to change about yourself because it's who you are. And the same thing with me. Now, we can try to put up a facade, and we're both seen with people in our lives where they meet somebody and they want to change for that person, for the good of the relationship. It never works because they're trying to be something they're not. That's my observation. Now, as far as mistakes, like somebody gets into drugs or alcohol, unless that's their nature, maybe people can overcome that. I mean, that's still a hard road to overcome. But,
Well, so if people are not capable of change, then what are they lacking?
what are they lacking?
Yeah. What is it about the makeup of man that makes him not capable of change, as you so put it?
Let me think about that for a second. Other than being flawed?
Yeah, we're absolutely flawed, but so take the alcoholic that's a raving alcoholic, and he reaches a point where he's so low and rock bottom, where he actually chooses to succumb, if you will, to go to AA.
But he wasn't born an alcoholic. That was a mistake that he made along the way. That may or may not be his nature. We all have tendencies. I don't know if that person, some people are going to be alcoholics and there's nothing you can do about it. They have that type of addictive personality. Some
Yeah.
people fall in with the wrong crowd. They have a bad run in their life and they turn to booze or drugs to get through their life. Okay, maybe those people can turn that around. I don't know what their makeup is.
But isn't that an example of change, being able to change?
I said you can't really change who you are. If you're a scumbag, you're always going to be a scumbag. If you're evil, you're always going to be evil.
I don't know about that.
If you're a homosexual, you're always going to be a homosexual. It's who you are.
That's not true.
I disagree with you.
There's plenty of examples where people have changed,
Well,
especially in that regard. If you
how
look,
about if I tried to make you into homosexual? Are you going to change? I doubt it.
I doubt it, but if you're exposed to something enough where all of a sudden it somehow seems normal to you, then you might. You have to be careful what you put in your mind. I tell my kids this because you can be conditioned after a while to think something's normal.
Yeah, that's true. But
no matter how diabolical it actually may be.
yeah, well, the devil knows he's going to lose, but he does it anyways.
I think so, because he can't help himself.
Scorpion and the frog.
And he's not capable of being humble. He's not capable of submitting. He's not capable of admitting that God is superior, ultimately. He wants that position.
Lots of examples in human history of that.
100%, where people weren't willing to back down, no matter what. And they were going to do whatever it took, regardless of the amount of skulls they were going to crush, literally and figuratively. History is littered with, unfortunately, too many examples of that.
Yeah, and people who want what somebody else has.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I suppose, yeah.
Well, that's what Lucifer sees, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess
I'm just as good as him.
He's yeah, exactly. He's lustful. He's actually described that way in certain parts of the Bible. He's jealous. He's lustful in a way of God. He's what's the word? There's another word I'm thinking of. Not virtuous, but jealous. Overly relishes. Thinks he's just as good. Covets. Yeah, that might be part of it. There was another word. I can't think of it, but yeah. I mean, to the point where he's willing to be, thrown out of heaven along with 1/3 of the angels.
Well, and that will go in line with whatever, probably the percentage of people on earth who still don't turn to God after all these horrendous events that will unfold.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we already know this. Yeah, we already know, unfortunately, that X amount of people, a good percentage, just no matter what, are not going to bow their heads.
Do you know the story of the scorpion and the frog?
I have read it, but it sounds like you're better equipped to describe it.
Okay, well, since I brought it up, I'll just mention it because I think it does tie to this. The scorpion came to a river, couldn't cross the river.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Saw a frog.
Yep.
He said, "Would you mind giving me a ride across the river?"
Mm-hmm.
And the frog's like, "No, because
exactly.
Because you'll sting me and I'll die."
Exactly.
He goes, "Now, why would I do that?" He goes, "If I sting you, I'll die because I can't swim."
Mm-hmm.
And the frog thought about it and said, "Well, that's a good point." So he agrees to take the scorpion across the river. And halfway across, the scorpion stings
him. Mm-hmm.
And the frog's like, "Why did you do that? Now you're going to die." He goes, "It's my nature. I can't change who I am."
Well, in the case of that individual case of the scorpion, he certainly proved that. You know, you
Yeah.
say people just not subject or have the ability to change. I don't know if I fully agree. I mean, look at some of the.
You're pointing at, you're thinking drugs and alcohol.
No, I'm not. I was going to bring up another point. Think of the 12 apostles. Didn't some of the apostles, like Paul, for example, wasn't he at one point uh, outright killing and murdering Christians at
Yes.
one point? That isn't that an example of change, going from one side 180 degrees to the other? Seems like
It's
an example.
absolutely a change.
Seems like an example of change to me. And he was a man like you and I.
One man.
Well, again, I'm just citing an
The
example.
Bible already says most people aren't going to be reached.
Right. A good portion. Yeah.
And
Okay.
that's the thing I really want to point out here is that these enemies, if we talk about what's going on in our country today, the enemies believe that this is a war, and because they believe it's a war, they will do whatever it takes. They're not playing by rules. There are no rules. The only rule that they believe it is just win, baby. We've talked about this. They have no problem killing, stealing, lying. And if you say, well, I can't do that because that's not a fair fight. You either win or you lose in this situation.
Well,
If you're
yeah, I
thinking
mean,
fair fight, you've already lost.
well, that is one way to look at it. That's a worldly and earthly way to look at it. In earthly terms, in fleshly terms, absolutely. You either win or lose. And it is, in that case, man against man. But also ultimately, as the Bible constantly reinforces, really at the end of the day, the ultimate wars that we fight are spiritual in nature. And what's going on in earth is sort of a reflection of what's going on in the heavens as well. Good versus evil.
Yeah, but we've talked about this 100 times, Dan. Earth is a way station, right? It's not a permanent landing place. And so there
That's
is
my
no,
point.
there,
Yeah,
there
that's
is
my
no,
point.
yeah, there is no guarantee that there's going to be anything fair on Earth or equitable.
Absolutely.
And so you
Evil
can
is not
ignore,
fair and equitable.
you
Agreed.
can ignore everything and just sit there like those guys on the beach and let your throat get cut. But that's not my nature. I can tell you right now, there's zero chance I would have sat there and been a sheep. That's not my nature. I'll go down swinging.
Well, that's great. What do you say about the apostles, most of them, the way they died?
Well, they're better men than me.
But why were they willing to die that way?
Well,
That's a question you got to ask yourself.
I understand what the answer is because they knew that they they were. This is the way I understand it, and it could be incorrect. The apostles were giving a choice. You either bow to these demands of these men on earth who demand certain things from you, and you have to basically turn your back on God,
Hmm.
or you can choose God and suffer the earthly penalty. And they chose the earthly penalty because they knew in their own hearts that that was the better choice for them.
Well, wouldn't you think it prudent to choose the earthly penalty, knowing that we're only here for a short time, and that
That's what I just said.
after you depart from here, you're looking at eternity?
That's what I just said.
Yeah, a little bit different words. I'm just clarifying
Yeah.
for myself and those that may be watching this.
Yep.
We're
But
only here 80 or 100 years, folks, on average, plus or minus. It's not long.
but that
Uh,
goes down to your true belief. I don't think most people, and again, I'm not pointing at anybody in specifically, but and because I still wrestle with this.
You don't think most people, and I can add to that if you'd like, most people probably now in modern or contemporary times, but there was a time even in this country, and it wasn't that long ago, when most people thought otherwise. Actually, we've lost 2 or 3 generations, as I constantly like to remind myself, that there's just basic principles, and those are a lot of them that we don't teach children anymore. We just basically teach them, the worldly, the fleshly, the here and now, and materialism, especially especially in the Western world.
Yeah. What is the point of high school today?
That's a great question.
We still don't have an answer. We've been asking that question for 10 years.
No, I think we do have an answer right now. I think we have figured it out. K through 12, there's going to be probably a minority that agree with this statement and understand, and the bulk won't. But K through 12, as you and I are exploring via another source, which is not probably quite pertinent for this forum, K through 12 is a form of total indoctrination. Government indoctrination is what it is. Starting, at the youngest of ages of 4 or 5, right? I mean, what's taught in school these days, K through 12, for the most part, most of it's not very useful, particularly when it comes to like the mathematics, the real economics that you need to know and be able to survive, the real basic science that might be helpful, but particularly the mathematics and the real economics that you need to survive. We don't teach any of that. We don't teach kids the basics of banking and interest rates and stuff like that, and why it's important to control how much debt you have, because otherwise, as the Bible says quite clearly, those that are in debt, essentially, to paraphrase, are utter slaves. The bankers figured this out about 300 years ago, namely with the Rothschilds figured this out. He who controls the money supply, I don't care about the government and the laws, because I've got the people by the tail once I control the money. And so if I keep them ignorant to that, they're indentured servants and they don't even know it. That's where we're at, in my opinion, under the guise of this false standard of living. And what do I mean by that, folks? Most people in America, newsflash, don't own anything. Oh, I own my house. Did you pay it off? No. Well, even if you did pay it off, don't pay the taxes for 3 months and you'll see who owns your house. It ain't you. It's just an example. You really need to think, people, what is true and what isn't. And the thing is about, empirical truth is different from a fact. People confuse facts and truth all the time. It could be a fact right this second that it's exactly 78 degrees out, but 5 minutes from now or 2 hours from now, it may not be 78 degrees. But empirical and universal truth is something that stands the test of time, whether it was 2,000 years ago, the present, or in the future. It's still a truism. That's why when people make comments like, particularly people or friends of mine, and I won't get into names, or even family members, and make comments like, well, the Bible, it's not relevant. It's 2,000 or 3,000 years old. It's totally antiquated, not a date. Oh, is it really? Have you ever read it? Because if you did read it, and if you did spend any time whatsoever studying it, you'd realize that the truisms that are within it stand the test of time. That's how you know something is an empirical truth.
Kind of like freedom, right?
You got it, buddy. Same thing. Yeah. God gave us freedom. Absolutely. We are independent beings that have the ability to rationalize and think, because he gave us a mind and a spirit, and also he gave us choice. And that's freedom. Now, there's a big responsibility with freedom, to your point. With freedom comes responsibility and massive amounts of accountability. Two other things we don't teach people anymore either. We have a totally pass the buck society. Oh, it's not my fault. I see it all the time. I see it commonplace. I see it in business. People get blamed, stabbed in the back constantly. It wasn't me. It's not my fault.
CYA.
Yeah, nobody owns up to anything. Our own leaders don't own up to anything. Everybody passes the buck. So what do you think kids learn? They grow up the same way, and it perpetuates. And then nobody's accountable for anything, and nobody's responsible for anything. It's always the other guy's fault, except the guy in the mirror. And so then we piss and moan about the people we elect and the politicians. We can't stand them. Well, I got news, people. They are a reflection of us, because those people came from somewhere. They came from somewhere. They were born and raised and came up through a family, or I should say lack of a family these days in America, because the family's been under attack for 40 plus years, for those of you that aren't aware of that. And I'm making this point on purpose because there's 2 or 3 generations that think the way things are now are normal. See, Dave and I are 50 years old plus. We've seen it different 20, 30 years ago. It wasn't always like this. There actually was a mother and father at home. People actually had dinner at 5 or 6 o'clock, believe it or not, every single night, just like Leave It to Beaver. That was predominant in America up until 25, 30 years ago. It was absolutely predominant. Not anymore, though. That's my diatribe, and I'm sticking with it.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say. It's serious stuff, though. I'm laughing, but not out of humor. It's really not funny.
No, it's because people in this country have been asleep so long, longer than we've been alive, Dan. So we were indoctrinated to believe certain things that we thought were true. And think about this for 1 second. We talk about what I said about people aren't able to change, okay? If a lot of people will probably lose their minds, literally, become mental cases, if they have to try to question everything when you've been indoctrinated to believe so many things to be true, and then you find out that none of them are true. Mm-hmm. How many minds will just explode and be unable to process that information?
Well, yeah, I mean, basically you're dropping a heap of coals on their head. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a wham bam in an instant. It's a 180-degree shift instantaneously. And, it's for those that aren't prepared for that, it would be as you explain. You just wouldn't be able to deal with it, at least initially, for sure. Well, you and I would be the same way, if we were still kind of like that. For whatever reason, we're a little bit away from that. Maybe not fully, but a little bit anyway.
Well, we have to constantly tell us that we may not be right with our assumptions, right?
Absolutely.
We have to have an open mind mm-hmm. and listen to all information. And hopefully through prayer or meditation or experience, whatever we come up with the correct answer.
Well, we already know. I mean, we already know the correct answer, right? I mean, if you're a believer, you know how things are going to turn out ultimately. It's already written down for us. We already know. where things are headed. You know, the end times, I think now are approaching us. Will you and I see that it literally in our lifetime? I don't know, but the technology is basically here, along with the computing power, for a lot of that stuff to be carried out and controlled. You know, we're going to go away from physical currency, for example. We're going to go to totally electronic currency. I don't know if most Americans realize that. They're almost done constructing the electronic dollar. I'd say it's probably 2 years, 3 years tops or less to be rolled out. There'll be no physical currency whatsoever. And people say, well, what's the big deal? You know, it'll make things easier and whatnot. We're already using credit cards, debit cards, whatever. That's true. But it'll be 100% electronic currency, which means that there'll be no cash transactions whatsoever, which means that every single transaction going forward by every man, woman, and child on the planet, whether it's a buy or a sell, is going to be recorded and thereby trackable.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but
in governments like that sort of thing, so you can fill in the blanks.
Yep, they already have that infrastructure set up. I was reading
100%.
something this morning out in Arizona or Nevada, somewhere out there. They have this huge data processing system ready to go to basically see. This is why I don't use Facebook, okay? And I only post my videos on Twitter.
I don't do social media either.
Because this is the problem, folks, is they sell all that data. And what these
they say they don't, though.
Okay, I don't know if it was Bill Gates. I forget who it was who created this data processing center, but they are going to process all the information of the buy and sell of this crypto, the Fed coin or whatever, the US dollar coin.
I think it's going to be called the Fed coin, yeah.
And they're going to be able to now, and some people are going to love it. They're going to be like, oh, Dan, you need to buy these glasses. This is just in line with the type of stuff you like. There are people who love this stuff.
Absolutely.
Not me.
So I'll liken it to this. You remember the movie 10 years ago or so, maybe a little longer. It'll be like Minority Report, the Tom Cruise movie.
Yeah, they'll arrest you before it happens.
Yeah, and I wasn't thinking of that, but I was thinking when he's walking down the street or walking down the mall, you see all the holograms on the wall or whatever, and as I guess as the computer or whatever reads his eyeball, it identifies him, and right away all the centric advertising that's totally centric to him starts hitting him.
Yeah.
You walk down the street, Dave, whatever's totally centric to you. If you like juju beads or whatever it is, you like jelly beans, those ads are going to pop up. I walk down the street. If I like fishing gear, bang, they're going to stick a fishing pole in my face.
Well, most people can visualize that because your computer does that to you right now. When you go onto a browser or a website, the ads on those websites you go to are customized to your browser or your history.
100%. Now, let me gander this to you, and you know this stuff better than I do because of the business you've been in. Take the Universal Product Code, the UPC codes. You don't think those were created for a reason? Not just ease of use, folks. Those were created for a reason, okay? Because everything revolves around computing. And what do I mean by that? When you have the computing power, you have the monitoring power. When you have the monitoring power, you have the collectability power, AKA to be able to then build data, collect data, house the data, and then manipulate the data and dredge the data. And then from there...
We're talking a lot of data, right?
It's called big data.
Right.
In the IT world, it's called big data.
Right. And here's the link, folks. What do you need when you have big data? You need a lot of processing power.
100%.
And you need a lot of speed.
And it's here.
And how do you get the speed? It's called 5G. Well,
bandwidth speed. Yeah. That's not the computing power itself, the
No,
CPU,
all
whatever,
this,
and the memory, but
all these examples we just talked about,
they all tie
all
together.
gonna be
Absolutely.
it's all going to be tied into
Absolutely.
wireless capability. If you're talking surveillance, if you're talking about customization and
Mhm.
tracking and monitoring, it all comes down to speed.
It's real time as possible. Almost as real time, or maybe it's faster. I don't know. It's almost synapse speed of your motor neurons.
If
That
anybody's been
type
in
of speed.
China in the last few years, and I'm not sure if the rest of the world has this, one of the things that they do in the subway tunnels
Yeah.
is when you're coming into a station,
Yeah.
they'll put up like 100 meters of TV monitors, and as you're going by in the train, it looks like one monitor.
Oh,
So
really?
they show the commercial,
Oh,
and
wow.
it gets your attention because you're zipping by at 30 miles an hour, and that will all be
Interesting.
that will all be done with
Rolled out. Yeah.
computers
Yeah.
and
Absolutely. Yeah.
digital. It would all be
All digitized. Yeah. Yeah.
the Chinese just introduced a one of these see-through TVs
Mhm.
at one of the recent fairs. So all of this stuff is now going to be just glass, will become monitors. You'll have pieces of glass that will turn into monitors now. And the monitors will change based on who's walking by. Bill Gates built a house about 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and it was obviously the latest and greatest technologies. I worked on his house. I developed custom units for his house. Now, I wasn't involved in this, but I was told by one of the designers working on it that he had a house that if you visited him and you stayed with him as a guest, he gave you a pin that you put on your lapel or your coat, whatever.
Really?
And when you walked from room to room, it automatically changed the lighting, the music, the temperature, everything related to that room to your desires. Now,
And
if he walked in the room,
wow.
if
Wow.
he walked in the room, his
It would be
pin
different.
trumped you.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it
Yeah.
changed to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
some traffic lights or queues and lines, we'll all have these chips in our hands.
That's where we're headed, man.
Our lapel,
Listen.
and all of a
Absolutely.
sudden you'll be like, "Oh, Dan, you got to go to the back of the line, buddy."
Absolutely, bro. We're headed that way. Elon Musk, to adjunct to what you're saying, started a company. I forget how many years ago, but 2 years ago, he applied for a patent. I forget the name of the company, where, and as some of may be familiar, a pig, which is a mammal like us. A pig is a very high form of an animal. Pigs are very intelligent animals, as a matter of fact, as well. Some of you may know that. They're very intelligent. It's ironic and interesting how those of, we eat them. I mean, I like pork and bacon like the next guy. But it's ironic. We eat them, but they're highly, highly intelligent. Where am I going with this? He put a chip. He successfully, to date, has put a chip in a pig's brain. The chip is in the pig's brain, and the chip is monitoring many aspects of what's going on.
It's monitoring what it touches with its snout.
Yeah.
What I remember.
Yep. And all that. That's right. Yep. Yep. So, wait till they perfect that more, and they get it to the point of, where it monitors like everything the pig does, even its thoughts and stuff like that. And once they're able to perfect all that, I mean, come on, folks, you know where this is going, right? The pig is just, the trial basis. Okay. The intent of this is for mankind. They're going to then start putting these chips in human beings. Now, once you have this chip in human beings, you already have the internet laid out and the infrastructure in place for the internet. You already have fiber laid all over the world. You already have bandwidth speeds as fast as they've ever been, and getting even faster with the advent of 5G. So for those of you that may not be into IT or know that much about it, it's called Internet of Everything, IoT. All you need to know about IoT is it essentially hooks up everything to the internet. which is really at that point a neural network and a network of monitorization that's now centralized. So now when you put chips in people's heads, what do you think? You're going to be hooked up to the internet, and you're basically going to be an internet of everything, like another device.
Well, most people will be like, wow, that's like that
That's where we're
story
headed.
where you can download how to fly a helicopter and you go, do, 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 do. Now you
Okay.
can fly a helicopter, and now I'm
Yep.
fluent in
Yep.
Chinese.
Okay. So
And now
that's
I'm a martial arts champion.
there you go. That's the benevolent use. But what's the malevolent use? If you can do that in a benevolent manner, can't we now do something in a malevolent manner? Like, what if I download something to control you, Dave? And all of a sudden, because I'm tied directly into your motor neurons and into your, right down to your synapse and thought level. What if I download something into you that takes away essentially who you are and your free will and your freedom of choice? Now you're nothing more than a robot.
And that
Literally.
brings me back to
Literally.
the nature of man, as you like to say, Dan. It's ugly.
Yeah, the same.
So,
Yeah,
and so if you set up these systems, it's going to eventually fall into the wrong hands, and it's going to be used for, like you said, malevolent purposes.
that's my opinion. Yeah,
Because
yeah, I agree totally.
it's fact. It's not just opinion, it's fact. In fact, I sent you a video today that was sent to me by a person named, they said not to use the name. So,
Okay. Yeah, don't do that.
but I forwarded you a video, and it's a video of RFK in Germany, RFK Jr., who's talking about that, where he says, do not allow governments and institutions to set up these mandatory things, because as good as their intentions may be, guaranteed at some point it will be used for bad purposes. And I'll put a piece of that clip into this.
Well, yeah.
I will tell you this. If you create these mechanisms for control, they become weapons of obedience for authoritarian regimes, no matter how beneficial or innocent the people who created them. Once you create them, they will be abused. 100% guarantee that they will be abused.
And I'll stop right here. Let's just take one step further, and I don't think we need to go any further. Can you imagine during Nazi Germany 70 years ago if Hitler had the means and had the technology and capabilities that we're talking about right now? Just use your common sense. You don't have to be a psychological genius. Do you think he would have taken advantage of this technology? Yes or no? Somebody like Hitler? I would argue absolutely that it's a no-brainer. How about Joseph Stalin? You think he would have? How about Mao Tse-tung? Napoleon. Well, that's going way back, but just three of those guys, or the guy that ran.
What about Elon Musk? Bill Gates?
Yeah, I don't trust Gates as far as I can throw him.
No, all of them will. They'll come out and they'll try to profit from it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No. I know that. That's short term. That is so short term thinking, though. Yeah. On one hand, they'll profit from it, but on the other hand, they will cage man as well as ultimately themselves. So yeah, you'll get profit in the short term. Maybe the rest of your life and your kids might do all right, but who knows what will happen after that, right? Who knows what you'll construct and build after that and what it'll do to mankind. Look, the bottom line is we've now reached a point with advancement in technology where we're starting to, I see, come down like this and kind of walk the fine line. And now we're starting to thread the needle. And we need to be very careful because the margin of error with this stuff is not what it was yesteryear. Yesteryear, we had a lot more fat and buffer and could sway a little bit. But now that fat, that buffer, that line, whatever you want to call it, we go off a degree here or a half a degree here, and we could fall into oblivion, mankind as we know it. No doubt about it, in my mind. No doubt about it. When you factor in everything we're talking about with the Bible and the end times and where we're at with technology and stuff, and I was in technology for 25 years. I'm not really anymore. So I know the capabilities. I also know that, like, from a military perspective, the military's got stuff, guys, 10 years out, if not more, that we have no clue about. Nothing. No clue at all. We won't see it for 10 or 15 years in the private sector. They've got stuff now. We have no idea what they have and how they intend to use it.
So how does it, is it even possible to go back to, do you see that it's even possible? Because look at everybody when they go out to a restaurant right now, or even when they're in the same house, they could all be in the same room together, a family, and they're within 5 feet of each other, and they do not socially interact with each other. They're all on different devices.
They're not, for example, they're not doing what you and I are doing, even though we're, physically not together, but we are interfacing. We're having deep thought and conversation here. So yeah, I mean, it's not happening on average, I don't believe, anymore.
So
that's another form of disintegration of the family, and caused by grand distractions.
So technology, while it makes our lives easier in many ways, it almost turns us into non-humans.
Well, it makes us lazy for sure. It makes us lethargic in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Do we need God if we have government and technology and all these other things?
If you put it that way, the answer is no. And that's what a lot of governments do, and don't take my word for it, over time. You look at any dictatorship, particularly with communism, what's the first thing they do? They try to eliminate God altogether. They take all the books, all the Bibles, and they burn them in the public square. Now, why do they do that? That's saying, hey, you don't need God Almighty. You don't need the Holy Bible. You need me, baby. I'm the one. I'm your God. I'm your problem solver. Okay?
And when you have that chip in your hand and your social standing score falls below a certain level, you'll quickly find out what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, if people think that's good, more power to you. God bless you. I don't. It's time to wake up. And as time goes on, every day, every month, every year that goes by, the noose is tightening. And, we've, especially in this country, we have been, what's the word I'm looking for? How do I describe it? We used to be, about our liberties and justice and stuff, and we've traded all that for security. I just want to be safe. I want to be secure. I want to be safe. I'll give away my liberty.
And
so
everybody is guilty of that.
So much for my justice.
Because freedom is too scary. And if we talk about people turning to other people, this is why you have to stand on your own 2 feet. Because now if we're going to talk about churches, for those people who still go to church or believe in a church, we have what's called the 501c.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Charitable institution.
That basically was the government's way to put a chokehold on how far churches will go to challenge these issues. Because now these churches are more worried about their tax exemption.
Yeah.
501c allows a church to operate tax-free. They don't have to pay taxes.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have 501c, then too bad, so sad for you. So a lot of these churches don't want to risk losing it.
They don't want to challenge it.
They will not take on certain topics. They will not talk about certain things.
It's kind of sad.
And in many ways, they participate with the government to lead their flock down certain paths.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, most pastors, for example, maybe this is overstepping, but how come they never talk about the book of Revelation in the end times? Why is that? because it's not overly popular. It's not a really cheery word, you know. It's God's word, though. You either believe it or you don't. And again, you know, don't believe Dave and I. But if you really want to know what's going to go down, people, read the book of Revelation. And as you read it and study it, you will start to see the relevance of it in the world you live in. Don't take my word for it. You'll see example after example of what's going down and what has been going down, particularly in this country the last 40 plus years. And I don't see it changing, by the way.
No, and that's what I meant is, unfortunately, the one thing that I want to employ everybody here, implore, is that the Bible's been around a long time. It has information in there that talks about the nature of man and about really, in many ways, recommendations on how to prepare for when you're not here and how you should live your life to prepare.
Right, for salvation, right.
Okay. And so the Bible, while it talks about the importance of money to be able to do certain things, the Bible does not say money is bad. It does not say that that is the most important thing. It says the love of money is an issue, is a problem. And so
yeah, money's not the root of all evil. The love of money is.
Yeah.
I think
so
2 Timothy.
So because we have been indoctrinated in certain things and we have not been, for example, I went to Catholic schools. We read Bibles, but I never read the Bible every day like they used to 200 years ago. Right? You know, I mean, I was indoctrinated to believe certain things in this country that if you look at now, we will find aren't even true. For example, our founding fathers, they wrote a great document in the U.S. Constitution, but they forgot to get rid of slavery, right? I mean, back then, everybody thought slavery was normal. Today, people think it's insane.
And
so there are a lot of things that we believe to be true that are not true. And we will never be able to enact real change in this country because we don't have the courage to really look at ourselves. That's really all I have to say on that.
Yeah.
And I don't think people will. And that's why I don't think this country will change. I think it will have to fall apart. I think we'll have to go through significant pain. That's human nature.
Yeah, procrastinate and let stuff hit the fan.
And that's not my problem.
Yeah. The stuff will hit the fan before I get off the couch. Put the Doritos down. I'm watching my movie, man. I mean, come on now.
It's Dan's fault. It's not my fault. Right? It's Trump's fault. It's Obama's fault. No, it's actually our fault. We allowed it to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you could argue we've been asleep at the switch, you know, the American people. Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, how many people just wear a mask blindly and say, well, what could have hurt? It's only a mask.
Don't even go there. I had a lady look at me yesterday because I forgot to put my mask on.
What if it's hurting you?
Huh?
What is the scientific evidence that it actually makes a difference?
I was holding the door open for her, and she just stood there staring at me like I was Lucifer himself.
You should have gone.
I had the mask like down here, and I was reading the menu to order, a fish dinner, and she just was looking at me like, you know. And then I said, "Don't you want to come in? I've been holding the door." She's like, "You need to put your mask on. I've been waiting for you. Put your mask on." And I just was like, oh, "Here we go again." So, I put it on because I had to go into the establishment, but I'm just like, here we go again. You know, here we go. You know,
I'm,
and,
I'm
and
I'm hoping that some business owners out there, start to say, hey,
screw
we're
this.
not doing this anymore. Come and support us. And everybody leaves these establishments who refuse to stand up against this Gestapo.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, this. Look, at the bottom line is they're managing to turn people against each other. That's what they're doing, folks, in my opinion. They're turning us against each other. And when they say, I can't walk into a freaking Walmart or anywhere, social distancing, stay 85 feet away from each other. We're here to protect you. Make sure your mask is on. Make sure you're lathered up to your elbows in alcohol and everything else. Don't look at anybody, don't get near anybody. They're turning us against each other. Bottom line, that's how I see it. It's just a joke. The other thing is, look up what a virus is, folks. I've said this to my family as well. What would your sister Dave define a virus as? My understanding of a virus is it can't be transmitted through the air, and that a virus emanates from inside the body at a molecular level when it needs to, at a cellular level, fight, combat, or expel something that shouldn't be there. It just develops naturally. That's my understanding. And then on top of it, a virus is so minutely small, by the way, the mask that you're wearing on your face, put that mask under a microscope and you're going to see all the threads that make up the mask. And what you're going to see besides the threads, the fiber content that makes up the mask, you're going to see big holes in it is what you're going to see, like really big holes. It's basically pervious as opposed to impervious, meaning you'd be surprised what can pass through there. But Dr. Fauci says, hey, wear the mask, consider wearing a shield now, cover up every orifice, cover up your nostrils, your mouth, your ears.
Yeah, they wear those shields that you put on dogs when you don't want them to scratch themselves.
I mean, if you want to cover up every single orifice, you've got to wear a bodysuit, guys. I don't want to get into details, right? But,
Boy in the bubble.
Yep. There's something called the behind and everything else, right? Our privates and stuff. So you might as well cover up all that too while we're at it. So again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. My family reminds me of this all the time. Certain wise guys in my family. Are you a doctor? No, I'm not, but I do know how to look stuff up and I have common sense and my IQ's above 75.
Yeah. And it comes to, and I think the real issue here, the real issue that nobody's talking about, it comes down to trust and credibility. Nobody trusts the government or these people in these establishments saying these things. They all believe that they have an agenda.
They do?
If they came out and they actually were able to explain that there were studies and there's proof backing this up, rather than skew numbers. See, what they've been doing is they've been skewing numbers for the last 6 months, so the numbers aren't even reliable.
Well, if you go out to the CDC website, didn't they say a couple days ago
of the
172,000 deaths supposedly, only 6% of them, which is like 9 or 10,000 actually. Don't they say that on the website? I thought the other day they walked it back or something. I don't know. I didn't look at it. I should have. That's what I heard, but.
And that's the other thing to always keep in mind with government is they all lie. They all lie because this is their attitude is, okay, yeah, I'm going to lie because I'm going to get my way. I'm going to get my funding. I'm going to get my project. I'm going to get my agenda. And then if 6 months or a year from now, the truth comes out, too late. You're not going to change it. Just like they do now. You have Congress right now funding all these programs. This is why sundown laws are so important. There are programs being funded that aren't even debated in Congress now. They just get funded automatically every year.
I believe it. Yeah.
So once you get funded, you're good to go.
My father told me when I was a child, people in authority lie. And we all, if we are going to continue to live in a democracy, we need to understand that people in authority lie. People in authority will abuse every power that we relinquish to them. And right now, we are giving them the power to micromanage every bit of our lives 24 hours a day. They're going to know where we are. They're going to know the money that we spend. They're going to have access to our children. They're going to have the right to compel unwanted medical interventions on us. The Nazis did that in the camps in World War II. They tested vaccines on gypsies and Jews. And the world was so horrified after the war, we signed the Nuremberg Charter. And we all pledged when we do that, we would never again impose unwanted medical interventions on human beings without informed consent.
Here's the bottom line. We're distracted. That's by design. And if you don't think so, then you don't know what the hell's going on. And where was I going to go with this? So we're distracted. The value of our currency year after year, people have to work longer and harder. Both mother and father aren't home. So they're distracted with work all the time too, just to try to make ends meet. If there is a mother and father, by the way, in half the cases in America, there isn't. There's a single mother. Sorry, my bad. And what's the other statistic? Over half the children now are born out of wedlock. So between that and people just working all the time, worried about paying the heating bill and the electric bill, Dave, they're not worried about this stuff. And the leaders know this, by the way. They know this.
Yeah, for most people, there's not going to be any way to protect yourself from the pain that's coming.
There's not a good solution. No, there isn't.
So, because almost everything is owned by less than 100 people on Earth. And I know that's very difficult to believe, but with the advent of corporations, they can hide a lot of stuff. So
well, plus,
ABC Corporation is owned by this corporation, by this shell, by that shell, and it all funnels up to
well, it's a freaking zombie company, basically. Doesn't produce anything.
No, even the companies who do produce something.
Yeah.
We only know a couple of them. I mean, Jeff Bezos is worth what, $1 trillion or whatever he's worth. But there are people even bigger than him that you've never heard of.
Absolutely. 100%. No doubt about it.
And those are the ones pulling the strings.
It's called Bilderberger. Look it up.
So, all right, amigo. Well, we didn't get through. Next week starts. Next week we get into the Mark of the Beast. So that's why I didn't want to try to cover it tonight, because we'd be here till 3 a.m.
Plus, you're intruding upon my vanilla ice cream that's waiting for me.
Yeah.
Ooh.
There you go.
I must exhibit some discipline.
Yeah.
Maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, well, the good thing is now that we have it on dual recording, I don't think we'll lose this one.
Gosh, I hope not. It's called the backup.
Because I'll tell you, I was so freaking angry that we lost that.
Yeah.
But it was meant to be.
I guess so. Yeah.
But we still have chapter 1 to go into, and I'm sure those same topics will come back up.
Big time.
So,
big
thank you for
time.
your time, Dan.
Thank you, sir.
You have a great night.
I will.
Enjoy your day tomorrow.
Thanks, man. You too.
Hopefully you don't have to work.
Yes, that too. Thank you. Bye, all.
And people are walking around in masks where the science has not been explained to them. They are doing what they're told. They are these government agencies are orchestrating obedience. It is not democratic. It's not the product of democracy. It's the product of a pharmaceutical-driven biosecurity agenda that will enslave the entire human race and plunge us into a dystopian nightmare where the apocalyptical forces of ignorance and greed will be running our lives and ruining our children and destroying all the dreams and dignity that we hope to give to our children.